I have important information that the public at large needs to know. I have credible evidence that a one Nicolas Cage has attempted to steal the Declaration of Independence in the past and will do so again. We need a safe, secure location to store this important American document such that it can evade capture by the Ghost Rider. Luckily for America, I have the perfect hiding place, inside my copy of Pokémon Emerald for the Game Boy Advance. I'll use this video to document for you how I'm able to store this foundational piece of history inside a genuine GBA cartridge, and how you can use this method to store literally anything. Late one night, while trying to solve this problem and searching YouTube for cool places handsome young men can hide stuff, I stumbled across a truly revolutionary YouTube video by a guy called Paul Sarda. Paul was able to leverage the data available to the player in Emerald's PC boxes to encode real-world computer files. He was able to store a Pokemon Silver save file inside of Pokemon Emerald this way. But that got me wondering, could this be the solution to all of America's problems? With Daddy Longlegs hot on the scent, I contacted Mr. Sarda. Right off the bat, I want to be clear that this is happening on a genuine copy of Pokemon Emerald. But how is Paul able to store files on a GBA cartridge in the boxes of a Pokemon save file? Well, to understand that, we need to understand how computers store files at all. And for that, I'm going to throw things over to a much more calm, much more normal, standing in front of a green screen ADEF that doesn't have to worry about getting kidnapped by a cast member of the G-Force. Thanks, stressed out on the run ADEF. I'm ADEF in front of a green screen, and I'm really chill. You know how people always say computers talk in ones and zeros? I feel like everybody at a baseline level can, appreciate or at least accept that, but I feel like people don't really investigate it any further. What does that actually mean? You probably know that it's binary, but basically whenever a computer receives a 1, you can think of that like on, and whenever it's a 0, you can think of that like off. Let's look at a really simple circuit. Let's say I have a power source connected to an LED that's constantly trying to supply power to it, but on the way there's a switch. When the switch is open, no power is reaching the LED because the circuit isn't closed. Imagine the switch being open like having a 0. But when I press the switch and power reaches the LED, turning it on, imagine that as a 1. This circuit has a binary state of turning on and off the LED. Now imagine scaling this up to a much more complex machine that has many millions of tiny electrical signals which can be toggled off and on. This is, in a very, very basic, oversimplified sense, how computers are constructed. It's just a myriad of circuits that represent ones and zeros. Hopefully it would make sense then that if your computer knows how to interpret these ones and zeros, if you string them together to form a file, then you can store files on your computer in the form of ones and zeros. It's up to the computer's operating system to interpret those ones and zeros as having meaning, the same way that letters in the alphabet make sense to your brain because you've learned what they mean when strung together to form a word. Let's imagine an incredibly simple form of computer memory formed by just a bunch of switches. Let's say we have 8 switches. Each binary digit is just 1 bit, and each switch represents 1 bit of memory. So if I have 8 switches in sequence, that's 8 bits of memory, which is also known as 1 byte. This means our new rudimentary drive has a storage space of 1 byte. Massive, I know. Our 8 LEDs can be used to store anything up to and including 1 byte in size. So 2-bit, 3-bit, 5-bit, 6-bit files, that's all fine. So long as I know that on for an LED represents 1 and 0 is off. If I had 1,000 of my new 8 switch drives, I could store a kilobyte of information. If I had 1,000,000 of them, I could store a megabyte. Obviously though, this is gonna get out of hand really fast. For a gigabyte of data, I would have to have so many of these tiny little switches, but over time, they're gonna add up into a huge amount of space. Additionally, it's also gonna be a really slow way to read and write data. This is why computational advancements often are to make things smaller and faster. If you can take what is in essence just a switch and make it way, way, way smaller, you can store way more information way more cheaply in a way smaller form factor, and that often equates to speed as well. Now, of course, modern storage drives aren't just switches, right? Like, a hard drive uses magnetic fields to store information, and solid-state drives use actual, genuine, real-life magic. Technically, it's quantum mechanics and solid-state physics, but trust me, it's magic. But at the end of the day, they're really just a collection of billions and billions of what, in a circuit representation at least, could be represented as switches. Although a cursory glance inside of the data and values stored inside of a modern SSD would look like complete gibberish and random voltage values to us, our computer knows how to read and interpret these signals the same way that we know how to read and interpret an on LED as a 1. It's really the same thing. Every file on your computer, from a 2 kilobyte text file to-do list up to a 50 petabyte video of Agron being really cool, are really stored as binary values on your computer. Now, this is an oversimplification of things like modern compression and storage methods, but at the end of the day, computers really are storing all of your files with so-called binaries. Let's look at an image file. What information do I need to tell my computer about the image to make it look the way it looks? Well, first of all, let's assume I have a program on my computer that opens the specific type of file I'm making and interprets the binary as an image file. This is what the file extension, like .png or .jpeg, tells your computer. It says, hey, I'm an image, and tells your computer how to interpret it. You can open image files in text editors and vice versa, but you can see that the associated programs have no idea what to do with the relevant binaries, and you wind up with garbled nonsense. They're just interpreting it how they interpret their relevant binaries. But, you know, it's kind of beautiful in a sense. Anyway, back to my image file. If the file is black and white, I might just store the image's pixels in an array where the very first pixel at the top left is the first binary number in my array, where a 0 represents a white pixel and a 1 represents a black pixel. Then I can move on to the next pixel and the next, and so on. If my image is 8 pixels by 8 pixels, that means I would need 64 bits to represent my image, or 8 bytes. Really quick, before I go back to the green screen abyss and stop existing again and throw things back to the more normal 8F who is permanent and will make this video and exist forever, as opposed to me who will not, I wish I were kidding! I would like to ask you to subscribe. After all, it takes 2 seconds, check below the video, it's super simple, and it really does help the channel grow and helps us to make sure that you don't miss any of the further uploads, because, you know, other 8F has some really amazing stuff in the pipeline that I won't see, because again, I exist when called upon. I am summoned from a dark dimension. I do not exist in the strict sense that you do. I don't have a YouTube account. I don't have a soul. Anyway, I'm gonna throw things back now to super secret agent on the streets 8F, and I'm gonna go away forever. Or not. It's unclear. Infinity is terrifying.
But what about the Declaration of Independence? Well, at the end of the day, this document is just text, right? And when stored inside a text file, it's about 8 kilobytes. But with how short on time I am, how do I go about storing it inside Pokémon Emerald? Well, frankly, I need to find a place to hide right now because the guy from Raising Arizona is quickly closing in on my location. So I'm gonna throw things over to my associate Paul Sarda to explain his ingenious solution.
What information is accessible to us on a given Pokemon? Think of a Surskit. When you catch a Surskit, there's quite a lot of information attached to it. The gender, the ball was caught in, its nickname, etc. This information is ultimately stored as a series of bits on the cartridge, in such a way that Pokemon Emerald can look at that series of bits and go, that's level 100 Surskit caught in a Master Ball. We can manipulate that information to use for our own nefarious means. When you look at aspects of a Pokemon that you can customize, is it shiny? Does it have Pokerus? How much XP does it have? Who was its original trainer? What moves does it have, etc. We can create mappings for these traits. For example, take Pokerus. If a Pokemon is Pokerus, that means 1. If it doesn't, that means 0. Repeat for all of the traits that we can customize, legal or not. Doing this gives us 207 bits per Pokemon, while still having the Pokemon be loadable in the game. Now, the beauty of this solution lies with the PC. The PC is a lot like our image array, where 420 Pokemon are stored in a sequence, giving us access to a continuous series of bits. This gives us 86,944 bits, also known as 10,868 bytes, also known as 10.8 kilobytes. We can now create a program that can accept any sequence of bits, that is, any given file, like a text file or an image or a Pokemon Silver save, and output what sequence of Pokemon with specific traits is equal to the given series of bits.
Using Paul's website, which he calls MonFS, we can upload whatever file we want, and then the website will spit out the exact group of Pokemon we need to catch and every detail about them that we need to mimic in order to match the relevant binary.
Now, at this stage, it is worth noting that when Paul originally made MonFS, he did so with the intent to make sure that every Pokemon required for a given file was actually easily obtainable by a human being in real time. He neglected a lot of possible bits that could be added, like Pokerus being an additional bit of memory, having access to every species like Deoxys, for example, and many more, because he wanted this to be feasible for a person to do in real time.
This limited Paul to about 3 kilobytes, but I emailed him to ask him if we could stretch this thing to its absolute limits, all for the purpose of safeguarding America's birth certificate.
With our file uploaded, we can see that in the expanded version of MonFS, which intentionally ignores what you might consider regular Pokemon in favor of file size, there are some truly questionable, highly suspect guys in here. A Silcoon with 2 metronomes? Definitely. Don't even get me started on the hyper-specific trainer IDs and EXP values you're gonna have to do, not to mention the fact that some of these guys will need to be shiny and or have Pokerus. So yeah, obviously this would take you an unbelievable amount of time to do, but even though some of these Pokemon are technically impossible to catch or create, that's okay. First of all, with extensive glitch knowledge, these Pokemon are probably possible to generate in-game. But besides that, using modern technology, we can modify the boxes in our save file without ever modifying the game itself. Even if these Pokemon aren't legal for competitive use because they have illegal moves or whatever, it's fine for this. So after uploading the Declaration of Independence to Paul's website, and then getting the proper Pokemon set up in my box, my cartridge now contains the entirety of America's most foundational document.
Then if I send my copy of Pokemon Emerald to someone else and they go into the boxes in my save file and put the Pokemon they see exactly as they see them into the decode version of MonFS, they can get the file downloaded directly to their computer without them ever having been sent the file at all. We're almost safe from Mr. Cage. Now we just need to find someone who can keep this information safe. Someone I can send this cartridge to who's able to actually decode the information and keep it away from prying eyes. YouTubers.
Yeah, I'm not gonna like catch a spoink with 4 pounds. What? It's also with the trainer ID.
Yes, so
it's not only I have to like catch like a shiny Crawdon.
You
right?
need to reset your save
roll
file, a second copy of Emerald over and over again until you get the right trainer ID.
Theoretically, you could do this.
Do you have any guesses as to what I have stored here?
My current guess, just going off of big text files, is the entirety of the B-movie script.
It is B-movie script.
You are the second person to guess the B-movie script.
Could somehow, in this, I don't know how possible this is, just a playable version of Doom.
B-movie script.
You are the third person to guess the B-movie script.
Did you upload, I've never seen National Treasure, but did you upload instructions on how to find the National Treasure that I assume they're looking for?
You're so close. You're actually so close that I'm just gonna say you got it. No one else.
Yes!
No one else was even in like the right universe, and you have nailed it.
Oh, it's the Declaration of Independence. What?
Yeah.
This is crazy.
It is the Declaration of Independence. Good one, Adab.
Thanks,
Good
man.
one.
Thanks. It's America's most seminal document.
Inside Pokemon Emerald. That goes hard.
No way, it's a Declaration of Independence. I was gonna say that before I said the National Treasure thing, and then I was like, no, I bet the National Treasure thing is funnier.
The Declaration of Independence. you see, when everything goes to absolute shit, and we have the apocalypse, right?
Yeah.
Just know that if we have two copies of Pokemon Emerald,
We have America's greatest document.
amen, brother. Amen. It'll live on.
Finally, it's safe. But I know what you're thinking. Can we store something bigger? Well, with Paul's current method, not really. You could leverage maybe a few more bits if you actually modify the game, but again, with the current method, probably not. Unless you have unlimited copies of Pokemon Emerald, because with more copies, you can just store more and more Pokemon in more and more boxes. In fact, you could store a copy of Pokemon Emerald inside of Pokemon Emerald if you just have a couple hundred copies and $100,000 lying around. So, you know, simple stuff. But of course, to be truly safe from Nicolas Cage, we're gonna have to store this very video on Pokemon Emerald save files. For that, I'll only have to buy like a couple 100,000 copies of the game, which will only run me like $10 million. And for me, America's safety is worth every penny. Or I could just buy a flash drive.
Thank you so much for watching, and a massive thank you to my top tier patrons on Patreon, who you can see on screen right now. Supporting my Patreon at any tier gives you access to a bunch of cut content from my videos. In fact, there's a huge cut content portion from this video where I tried to store the entirety of a playthrough of Pokemon Emerald inside of the boxes of Pokemon Emerald, so definitely go over to the Patreon to check that out. Link is in the description. But again, just thank you so much for watching, and a huge thank you to Paul, without whom this project would not have been possible. Paul's work on MonFS is incredible. He so gracefully took all my ideas and made them reality on MonFS. So if you're looking for an Australian programmer that's really capable, the link to his website and his GitHub are in the description, as well as the link to MonFS's GitHub if you want to take a crack at improving the code or changing it, or just to look at how it works under the hood. But regardless, thank you again so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.